والآن ندعوكم للانضمام إلينا في الجلسة الأخيرة من جلسات هذا المؤتمر لهذا اليوم، وتأتي بعنوان التنمية المستدامة للاستزراع المائي لتحقيق الامن الغذائي وإدارة مصايد الأسماك الساحلية والصغيرة والاستزراع المائي ونهج البيئة. يدير هذه الجلسة مشكوراً فيليبوس باباجورجيو، ويتحدث فيها كل من الدكتور علي بن محمد الشيخي ومانويل بارنج وبالمي بالماسون وكارولينا كارانزا.
Thank you all for coming to this session. We have seen some very interesting presentations, and there's some questions that we can ask to either elaborate a bit more or gain more knowledge on these initiatives. I'll start with Dr. Ali. I'll follow the process, the order of the presentation. So in your presentation, Dr. Ali, you touched upon the emphasis that the ministry is placing on research and development programs and on projects, especially on the need to boost collaboration among the various research and academic centers that we have here in the Kingdom. And you mentioned that a new fishery research center is going to be established, along with the creation of a National Research Council. Can you elaborate, please, on that, and how do you see that being structured and functioning?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Philippos. First of all, I would like to say something about our research. We do believe that our research is something is different. Usually research for research, but our research for applied. And our customers is the private sector. We work together with private sector to identify the need, and accordingly we build our strategy research agenda. A few years back, it was a thought. Today it is in the ground, applied and successful achieved. The research we started a few years back with KAUST, followed by King Faisal University, King Abdulaziz University as well, and we are looking for international and local institute. It's not limited, it's not stop, it will be continuous. And the development and research, it will be ongoing project in MIWA. We do believe that without research, the industry will not grow further. The research is the key element for development. We saw in the presentation for NEOM example, few things related on the research. If it's success, it will be big jump for the industry in Saudi Arabia. And the feed research, at least, one of the elements which we engaged with cows a few years back, it will make a significant change in the term of the cost and efficiency in the growth. This is what we believe, that it is a combination between the need from the private sector to grow and the support from government. We work with the private sector as a partnership, and this is make us little different from other research. And the good things, we have in neighbor countries, we are working to develop those type of research to be shared and to be useful for everybody. The regional center, it was a few years back an idea. It's been developed. It's been created as a small model. At the end, we are so lucky that Crown Prince announced it officially last October, and now it's became from the dream to reality, and we start the bidding, and a few months from now, the construction will start it. This is will be one of the biggest research centers worldwide. The good thing, all the private sector is participating, either directly or indirectly. And we had a few weeks back, created a regional national research council. Will be a significant change in the approach of the research in Saudi Arabia, and the reflection on the private sector will be seen immediately. I'd like to take more time for others, and we will back again if there is any things related to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next question is for Dr. Barange. We know that aquaculture is among the main driving forces in blue economy, and you rightly said that it's not direct part of SDG 14, life underwater, as it should be, but aquaculture does play an important role in most other SDGs, such as no poverty, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, industry innovation, good health and well-being, zero hunger, and so on. So, with your experience, how can we accelerate progress towards these goals in the region, or put it in another way, what in your opinion should be the priority of the governments in these regions to achieve these goals?
Yes, thank you. Very interesting question. It's true that aquaculture is not explicitly mentioned in SDG 14, although it is implicit in many of the indicators of SDG 14. And the SDGs were developed in 2012, so 10 years ago. It took 3 years to agree. And at the time, aquaculture was still growing, and it was not as connected to the policy discourse as it is now. Let me tell you very briefly a little story. In the year 2000, so 20 years ago, a group of international agriculture research institutes produced what is called the Fish to 2020 report, which was a significant report on what was the expectation of aquaculture growth by 2020. Now, we know what the result is, but in the year 2000, after analyzing all the parameters around and after looking at all the possible scenarios, that study said that global aquaculture would grow to 53 million tons in the year 2020. The real figure, now that we know it, is 84 million tons. They were almost 60% short. Okay, they failed by 60%. Why is that? Because they did not take into consideration sufficiently innovation, technological innovation in the sector. They didn't consider the power of markets and the economic liberalization of markets and globalization. And third, because of management of aquaculture around the world. So what is it that we need to do to improve the contribution of aquaculture to the Sustainable Development Goals, looking at the history, this little story? There are 4 things, I would group them. The first is in the area of governance. We need to make sure that we provide a framework for governance of aquaculture that the businesses can rely on, that they know spatial planning, that they know what can be done, when, for how long, and what are the regulations around it. That governance is crucial, and it is essential for governments to make it clear. The second is in the area of operations and production, and we've had a very good presentation on NEOM as to some of the things that need to happen in terms of feed, in terms of disease control, in terms of effluents, and so on and so forth. That is very clear. The third one is about equitable access, and this is perhaps what I want to elaborate a little bit more, because we need to make sure that aquaculture is developed for the many and not for the very few. So who gets access to the resource? How do we entice youth into the business? How do we generate gender-specific policies to make sure that we bring new people into the industry? How do we train them? Not just training from a technical point of view, but training as a business. How do we train businessmen and businesswomen to make sure that they make the most of that industry? That is absolutely crucial. And fourth and last is the monitoring and reporting. As the industry develops more and more, we need to improve the way that we monitor those successes and that we report those successes so we can learn from those successes as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. These are certainly some lessons that we can all learn from your experience in FAO, and we have to follow through. Next question is for Mr. Palmason. Mr. Palmason is the manager of open water aquaculture in NEOM. And in the presentation of Mr. Juan Carlos earlier on, we did see NEOM's plan towards aquaculture. It's not just production output, it's not just volumes, it is also new knowledge creation and know-how development. But what do you expect to be the major challenges to achieve those goals?
So we're going to be deploying new technologies. We're going to be deploying new technologies in the region. So that's number one. Our mandate is to push the envelope of innovation, not just breed fish as it's been done in the last 20, 30 years, but focus on innovation, figure out where we can play so that we can be raising fish in the way that it's supposed to be done in the next 20, 30, 40 years, and then pushing the envelope of those innovations proactively within the region, as well as testing out global innovative solutions. We're also domesticating native species that have never been commercialized before. And that's both a challenge and an opportunity, because we can put a stake in the ground and create species that people then will come to us to be able to gain our genetics and then take that further. We're trying to scale those species in speeds that haven't been done before. Salmon has taken 40, 50 years in getting to where it is. We sometimes forget that we can't just reach into the Red Sea, grab a few species, and turn a wild animal into domesticated one, commercialize it, and get it done in a few years. This can take decades. But with new technologies in genomics, we can accelerate this process, and utilizing the best possible technologies in creating those advances and creating a proprietary species that Saudi Arabia can be at the forefront with. And because we're in NEOM, because we have a very strict sustainability and conservation mandate, most aquaculture companies, most aquaculture startups do not have to adhere to the strict conservation and sustainability compliance that we set ourselves. So in doing so, we can create a model that shows people that you can do things right from the beginning. And I think that will show people that we're utilizing all the lessons learned in the last 50 years and defining how things can be done properly from day one. And that can be a blueprint for sustainable aquaculture in the future. And the last challenge is NEOM does not intend to be the operator of those projects 100% on our own. So one of our challenges is to identify global and domestic partners that can help us. As Juan Carlos was talking about, we have multiple pillars, and how can one of our challenges is to identify the partners that can take us there, and the best strategic partners that align with our vision, have prior experience, have knowledge, and can move that process towards success.
Thank you very much. Our next question is to our lady in the panel. Ms. Carranza, aquaculture and fisheries is indeed an integral part of the blue economy, and it does contribute to many SDGs, as we said. Marine aquaculture in our region is more capital intensive. It does require increased know-how and experience to be successfully operated, and especially for the high-value marine species. But that's not the case for the freshwater species, which is less capital demanding. It can be practiced in much smaller scale, in family type, artisanal scale, and it can provide income and good nutritional products for the populations in rural areas, and also support the social cohesion in these rural areas. In this context, how do you see IAFA be able to guide the efforts towards developing this sector in a sustainable manner in this region?
Thank you for the question. Actually, we aim for the IAFA not only to have events of celebration of the year, but to propose a platform of exchange of ideas and experiences, and taking into account what you have said, you explained about the situation in those subsectors in this country. Well, IAFA is based on the sustainable development, and the 7 key pillars, each one of the key pillars presents activities that a country, a government, or any other stakeholder could take action about following those guidelines. And especially it comes in an important place on those days, because many of the fishers and fish farmers have been in our countries have been impacted negatively by the COVID. So right now is more than ever is important to have the governments take action and have initiatives and concrete measures in favor of these populations. And for example, I will give you an example. The Ministry of Production of Peru, that is chairing the International Steering Committee, have analyzed some actions already that are taken in favor of these fishers and fish farmers. That they have also the same circumstances that you have explained that it's in common with in this country. So based on the pillars, we have taken action strengthening the capacity building of the fish farmers, especially the fish farmers, where when the innovation and technology is much needed. But we also are taking care of preserving the cultural heritage, the cultural practices. But I think that, well, we aim in that this IAFA Global Action Plan present to all the countries concrete actions like for fish farmers. Just an example is the simplification and the access facilitation, administrative rights, and the access to technology and innovative measures that I think the involvement of all the governments are the main objective to us in the IAFA celebration.
Thank you very much. Going back to you, Dr. Ali, the Ministry and the National Fisheries Development Program, they have been working a lot on the R&D side. Over the years, you presented us that. We're working on well, I said we are working on many species. We're working on improving the efficiency of the species that have potential for the market. But a big pillar for the development of the sector in the country is market development. Can you elaborate on what actions have been taken and what will be taken in the years to come to support the industry, aquaculture, but also the fisheries product, the capture fisheries product?
Thank you it's a good question actually. Production proven in Saudi Arabia, it can be done, whatever scale. The proven of shrimp has significant growth and high production over past years and will continue inshallah. The fish cage is proven in Tabuk in the north and Tharawat in the middle and Leith in Naqwa. And in the close what called system and bond, it's all proven production-wise. Market is a challenge. There is few things: market development, seafood consumption, and regulation. Those elements, it is combination. We are working from ministry perspective to develop the regulation to protect the local producer by developing the standard, the specification, and we're able to change it in the past few months. And currently now, it's been notified to all countries through the WTO that SAMAC standard, which is belong BAB, it is the standard will be allowable to receive a commodity in Saudi Arabia from aquaculture farm. The other part, in the regulation, we work closely with all related entity, SFDA and SASU and the other entity from customs and from the export entities. All those now we became as a partner to develop and to work hand to hand to protect and to develop the local producer, either for local consumption or for export. Market and seafood consumption, it is a big challenge. The ministry take initiative to develop this part by creating awareness campaign. We work closely now with all private sector. We create this new steering committee, is managed by MIWA and participated by all the stakeholders in the business. And few months from now, the campaign will start, the initiative will be published. And it has what you call a strong message and clear objective to achieve the areas where need to be developed and to increase. In the coastal side, we don't have problem of the seafood consumption, but inside cities, we have a big issue. And this is the initiative. It could solve those problems. But again, there is a lot of work need to be done. It will not be happen overnight. It will take time. But we are working clearly with a clear strategy to achieve that target. And hopefully by 2025, we'll have a significant change in the seafood consumption, and it will reflect in the producer and the consumer and the increase of the commodity and quantity as well in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much. I'll move to Dr. Barange now. We saw NEOM's ambitious plan on how they're going to use latest technology and innovation to advance knowledge, to advance know-how, and to apply that in aquaculture. All these technological advancements and innovation that we see globally, will they be able to bridge the gap between countries in the region, or will they widen it, depending on their capacity and the capability to incorporate these technological innovation? And in this context, how important it is to institutionalize collaboration among these countries with organizations such as GFCM and NACA that do have experience in this field?
Thank you. Well, science and innovation on principle should actually benefit everybody. But we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and it is a good example because one of the greatest successes that we've seen during the pandemic is the development of vaccines, the innovation and the science behind those. But it has actually resulted in a very unequal distribution of vaccines around the world. So in fact, some of those gaps, inequality gaps, have increased. So it is a good question. How do we make sure that that doesn't happen in the development of innovation in aquaculture? Well, it depends very much as to what is that aquaculture for. If the aquaculture is particularly to develop high-value product for export at a high price, with a very intensive and very high technology investments, then it might actually increase the gap between the countries because you need a significant investment to get into that sort of production. But if that development is actually focused on feeding people, is to make sure that people get fed and making use of regional markets, making use of the connections between the countries of the region, then that technology would benefit everybody and will close the gap. Bodies such as FAO, the General Fisheries Commission for the Mediterranean, NACA, they can help because they can provide the standards. They can regulate, not regulate, but they can agree with the member countries to certain standards to make sure that they all are lifted at the same time rather than allow these inequalities to raise. But as you know, I'm a scientist, and as a scientist, I have to defend science and technology and saying that that should be for everybody and for the best of society. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. There was an ethical message there as well. I'm moving to NEOM. Do you believe that NEOM will act as a catalyst to import, to develop, and to further develop innovation for aquaculture, but not just for the NEOM region, but also initially for the rest of Saudi Arabia, but for the region as well. For subtropical aquaculture, there is a big knowledge gap, whether we do on species or on how we apply these technological innovations on the species that thrive in these waters. So how soon do you see this knowledge that will be developed in NEOM to be moving towards the rest of the country, the rest of the region, and globally, if that is possible?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because you are investing a lot in innovation.
Well, just look at the salmon industry. The Norwegians don't own salmon. It's spread all over. The cradle of innovation in salmon starts in Norway, and then all of the work in genetics spreads out throughout the industry. So it doesn't become proprietary to a region. But at the same time, the output of the hatchery, for example, will not be proprietary to NEOM in terms of we're not only going to raise fish that's going to be put into the water or raised within NEOM. This will be shared or sold within the region. Therefore, all of those advances will be spread around. And I will say that will greatly benefit the region because the hatchery is, for example, the hatchery is set up as an innovation hub in genetics and breeding technologies of the likes that we haven't seen in finfish before. And NEOM wants to take active participation in that, as well as collaborate with other institutions in the region. And the more we do, the better the results will be, 100%. And then our investment in new species development is a risk that most private companies just don't take. But it is our mandate in NEOM to further Red Sea species, identify opportunities in breeding wild stock that can be domesticated and commercialized, but private companies don't take this risk normally. When we transfer that then onwards, all of the work that happens within NEOM, of course, we can't close down walls and contain that type of work within the NEOM space alone. People are going to be coming and going and be exposed to all the good work that will be done there, and that will, again, further benefit the region. And on the marine farming, by utilizing the best possible equipment, we attract people, we attract foreign vendors. They get a footprint in the kingdom. As soon as they hit the ground within Saudi Arabia, they will, of course, look to further opportunities within the kingdom after they've learned how to interact with the environment, set up a base of operation. So NEOM will act as a catalyst for that just by default, by attracting the best of technology providers for our systems. We will also give them a foothold in the kingdom, and they will always look for further opportunities to identify other places to play. And the more people that participate in that, the more opportunities we'll see. And the same we'll see the same in processing. Investing in advanced processing, secondary processing, participating in the trends of giving the Gen Z, Generation C and millennials what they want, which is ready-to-eat meals, which are not readily accessible here in the kingdom. This will come in the next 10 years. We want to participate proactively in this development, but we're not going to be the only one. So by proactively assisting the industry in moving forward, we will actually also influence some of those activities, and hopefully the rest of the industry will collaboratively participate in that moment. So I think as we participate, we learn and also share.
I'll stay on this one because Juan Carlos mentioned that there is a second phase of more value-added products being produced, putting more emphasis there. You mentioned that you need to work on processing, but also you brought the example of salmon. Salmon is one species, global species, with hundreds of different products, and it has literally flooded the market. Everyone eats salmon. We eat salmon here in Saudi Arabia, which is not a local species. Still, it has a huge success. Where do you see NEOM working with species that can provide different product types rather than many species for a whole fish presentation in the market?
That's a good question as well. So when I started in the salmon industry 20 years ago, we're primarily focused on fillets, and portions were cut by hand because economics, we didn't have the volumes to sustain full portion lines, full value-added lines. So portions were such a small part of the market that people down in Chile, for example, were cutting them by hand, therefore not making them uniform and as good as they should be. So by identifying species that can be commercially scaled up, industrialized, we will also unleash another phase, which will be the addition of advanced processing lines. You can't invest in an advanced processing line with 1,000, 2,000 tons. You have to have scale to be able to justify the procurement of such a capex. So therefore, by growing the industry, we will create an opportunity for a higher level of sophistication in processing technologies than has been available in the kingdom, just because that's a volume-driven decision. You cut by hand when you have 1,000, 2,000 tons. As soon as you're up to 10, 20, 30,000 tons of a species, you start trying to go into better yields and a higher sophistication of processing.
Thank you. Well, I can tell you that the non-NEOM parts of the country are really looking up to what you're doing, but with what Dr. Ali said, that we're going to work under one research governance structure, I'm sure that we can all benefit from that. I'll move to Ms. Carolina Carranza again. This is a blue economy section, and we haven't touched upon fisheries. And apart from aquaculture, artisanal fisheries is indeed a very important, socially important sector in the region. It's more of an issue in some regions, more of an issue of food security, but in some others, it's about providing sustainable employment, maintaining social cohesion, and preserving traditions and the cultural heritage in these coastal communities. So in the GCC area and the MENA region, practically what can be done during the IAFA year to support this sector and to support these people whose livelihoods rely on this sector either directly or indirectly?
One of the main messages of IJAFA is the empowerment of the fishers and fish farmers communities. So what we can do, we can look for the solutions or proposals and the IJAFA Global Action Plan. Getting involved in the IJAFA activities and in the platform that it's formed by the International Steering Committee. And since to exchange ideas of what can be done together, because at the end, as you say, some countries look for food security and others for economic sustainability. But I think at the end, we are looking for the needs of the livelihoods of the fishers and fish workers. We have several proposals at the document, and one of the main instruments that we are base the work of IJAFA is the voluntary guidelines of the small-scale fishermen. One of I would like to highlight the capacity development. I think it's one of the main points that we have to work together to enhance the life of the fishers and fisher farmers and fish workers in all our countries.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There is one last question which is open to anyone in the panel. And it has to do with seafood fraud, seafood labeling. We know that we produce very high quality products in aquaculture. We have, in certain parts of the world, we have sustainably certified fisheries, but still seafood fraud is a big, big issue. What good examples do you have, either from the market or from governments, international organizations, and what suggestions you would have to combat this? Because it would be pointless producing all this good quality feed, having all this investment, and then consumers not knowing what they're eating. Anyone willing to answer?
You answer? It's up to you.
Palmi, I know that you've done a lot of work in trading, seafood trading, and you know the issue of mislabeled products.
So about just over 40% of salmon sold in Manhattan, New York is mislabeled. So this is not, that's a study that was done 3 years ago by the Attorney General of New York. Spent over 1 year in analyzing the salmon market and found that over 40% of particularly salmon was not represented in the right way. So one of the biggest enemies of mislabeling is local production, because the supply chain and the traceability is all local, and you can't sell Chilean salmon as Norwegian salmon or play around with that because you're doing that from the import side. So the biggest enemy of mislabeling is a localized value chain where the consumer knows where the product comes from and has a close connection to the product itself so that they can understand and quality control the product. On the other side, the people have been talking about digitizing traceability, utilizing blockchain and all sorts of digital mechanism, which is great. Simple supply chains where the end buyer is buying directly from the source. That's one of the solutions. You see Costco and Walmart in the US going straight into production to avoid this. But from our side, producing products in KSA for consumers in the kingdom is always going to be the best opportunity. That's lower carbon footprint, direct connection to the consumer, from production to the consumer, food security, and avoidance of being left behind in the case of a rising supply gap around the world and suppliers prioritizing markets not necessarily by what we want, but more from what they decide to do. So that's why we've been, and as Dr. Ali has been talking about, always prioritizing local production and be a net producer here in Saudi Arabia so we can control that.
Thank you. Dr. Barange.
Well, just to add to that, because traceability, certification, labeling, these are issues around the value chain that are very important, very serious, and it's true that there have been some very clear solutions, and you mentioned blockchain, and it's obviously digital solutions that bring clarity from source to plate are very important, very useful, and will solve some of these problems. But in FAO, what we are also very cautious about is to make sure, talking about inequalities, that does not bring an inequality in the market even more, because there is product out there that is sustainable, but there is not sufficient traceability to demonstrate that. And what we don't want are solutions that are going to work against those small producers that do not have the capability to get on board the technological wave that will solve these problems. So we have to work on these two levels, make sure that you develop that traceability from source to plate, and making sure that we bring everybody on board, not leave people behind, because otherwise we unbalance the market even more.
Okay, I'll mention what we had an action during past years. We were in Nawar with few countries related to the label. Today, I think we solve around 40 to 60% of this war, but still there is. And we are aiming by next 2 years maximum, the label, traceability, certification will be applied for all, internal and external, import and export, local consumer, and for the export as well. This will be mandatory, and within 2 years from now, we will be able to be certified all Saudi Arabia, all the products from Saudi Arabia for local and export consumer will be labeled and certified. This is one of the key elements and the key success factor to change and to transform the industry in Saudi Arabia. And this is a target. It is not a thought. It is a target.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, with this, I'd like to thank you, my lady, gentlemen. Thank you all very much. Thank you all for your attendance today. I think that concludes today's program.
Yes.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.